Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Commissioner, I just want to clear this up for Liberal members who, unsurprisingly, don't seem to know what it is that you do here. But can you please confirm that you do not have jurisdiction or mandate over the Arrive scam scandal?
I do not have, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, my jurisdiction only extends to reporting public office holders, i.e. senior public servants who have been appointed by order in council, to put it in common language.
And the people that do fall under your mandate, lavish dinners, whiskey tastings, being given to those individuals by suppliers or involved parties, that would be that would fall under your mandate and trigger an investigation.
It triggers an investigation or not depends on the specific facts, but clearly the conduct of reporting public office holders with suppliers, customers, or something like this, etc., depending what the situation is, what happens, etc., would be subject to the act and could lead to an investigation.
Of course. Yeah, it seems like there was an attempt, with you having been suggested as a witness, that this would be an opportunity for the government to exonerate themselves from the wrongdoing that's occurred in this $60 million scandal. But of course, they summoned the wrong officer of Parliament to offer that exoneration if it were available. I have a question for you, Commissioner, about Ms. Annette Verscherian, who was the Liberal-appointed chair of Sustainable Development Technologies Canada. That's the billion-dollar green slush fund. Why was she subject to the Conflict of Interest Act?
Well, she was the chairman of the STDC, and as such appointed by Governor and Council, and so she was subject to the Conflict of Interest Act. She declared her conflict, and she went through the rules of when she was appointed, letting us know her interests, what's there. We appointed a counselor, as we call them, to her to make sure that her affairs would all be in such a way that there wouldn't be a conflict of interest.
Who was the head of government at the time that she was appointed?
Do you know, Michael?
She was appointed in 2019, so it would be the current government.
So the head of government was Justin Trudeau?
Yes.
What sections of the Conflict of Interest Act did Ms. Verscherian violate while chair of the board at the Prime Minister's slush fund, having been appointed by his government?
Well, you read my report. So I made an extensive investigation into her activities, and I found out, first of all, that she's not only head of the STDC, she was also head of two not-for-profit organizations, one called Verschuren Center and one Mars. And such, which are basically incubator organizations. Right. And certain companies came forward which were sponsored by these incubators. She declared her conflict of interest, but then there was an actual vote, what they called what it's called.
I apologize for the interruption, sir. I'm quite tight for time. I was looking for the number at which sections that she violated. Are you able to reference those offhand, or just to enumerate the number of sections that she was found to have violated?
Yes. Michael, give him the details, please.
So there were two provisions. It was subsection 6.1 of the Act and section 21.
Sir, are you able to tell us how many hundreds of thousands of dollars she was deemed to have been the beneficiary of as a result of the conflict?
As part of the report, we didn't do the calculation based on the votes and the dollar amounts associated with those votes.
So we have the Prime Minister's hand-picked chair of his billion-dollar green slush fund who's found guilty of breaking Canada's ethics laws. This is, of course, the latest in a long list of Liberals to have been found to have contravened this act. In your investigation, did you find that former Liberal Innovation Minister Navdeep Bains was aware of Ms. Verscherian's conflict of interest with NR Store at the time that she was appointed? Just a quick yes or no, if you could.
We did not look at at her appointment. That's not our job. Our job is to look at her, not the steps that go to her appointment, but once she is appointed, does she have a conflict and how can it be resolved? And by the way, what we did find, and let's make it quite clear, that she received incorrect legal advice, and that was the real problem. And her advice was, because it was an emergency COVID, conflict of interest issues do not apply. That was absolutely wrong. She followed that advice and voted on the subsidies that were given to all companies, to the injections in order to help them survive the COVID crisis. And what I found is, no, you shouldn't have done that. You should have recused yourself. You should have walked out of the room because the vote affected a company in which you have an interest. She didn't do that, but she did on the record clearly shows that she was told no conflict of interest is here. And I spoke to her counsel. I cross-examined him and said, on what basis? And he said, on my knowledge of basic corporate law. There's no corporate law that I know of that says because there's an emergency, conflict of interest does not apply. So it was just incorrect advice that she followed.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Moving now to Ms. Bradford. Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for Commissioner for attending this committee today. Again, the meeting was called and the subject was to be on ArriveCAN, but I see that MP Barrett has now shifted it to focus on Sustainable Development Technology Canada. So along that line then, since he's chosen to steer this discussion in that direction, do you think that, so the Conservatives are continuing to cry wolf despite the fact that the government has taken responsibility for the lapses in the governance by implementing Swiss changes to address the situation? Since your report has come out, the SDDC funding's now been transferred under the National Research Council, which should ensure more stringent oversight. Given your findings, how do you take the news of the structural changes and how will it lead to better accountability and oversight in your view?
Really, the whole issue of conflict of interest in an organization like STCC is key because you have to know something about the industry in order to know what kind of support they need and what kind of form that support to take. On the other hand, you can't have conflicts, etc., or you have to recuse yourself. So it is ever present. The STCC has a very elaborate code of dealing with conflict of interest, which mirrors the provision of the Conflict of Interest Act. All they had to do is follow their thing. And unfortunately, because it was an emergency situation, they thought it didn't apply and they were advised that. I expect that now, on the new, in light of my report, there will be heightened attention to their own internal code and our act, and an attempt to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. So in looking at your interpretation of subsection 6.1, would it be fair to say that the mere existence of a conflict of interest wouldn't amount to violating the Act, but rather one's active participation and the making of a decision in instances where the individual knows there could be a conflict of interest? Is it my understanding that that's correct?
Yeah. If there's a conflict of interest, there are remedies. One of them, as I say, recuse yourself. Get out of the room, let the others make the decision, etc. Then you're perfectly fine. But if you stay on your vote or you participate in the discussion, then you get yourself into problems.
Right. And you found that Mrs. Verschuren did not sufficiently remove herself from decision-making in certain instances, right, given she abstained rather than recusing herself. In so doing, she was deemed to have participated in decisions and contravened Section 6.1 and Section 221. If she properly recused herself in every single instance, would you have found her in breach of both sections?
No. If she had recused herself, there would have been no breach or contravention of the Act.
And in order to respect the Act and even STDC's own conflict of interest policies, individuals should have recused themselves. The AG found that there were 90 cases where the Foundation's conflict of interest policies were not followed. linked to $76 million of funding. Commissioner, given the lack of recusals, it is in these instances that SDTC leadership would have contravened the act, correct?
Not quite. I only asked to look at people who fall under my act. Those are the people who are appointed by order and council. And there are lots of members on the board of STDC who are not appointed by order and council, and their conflict is not part of my remit. I find it shocking to see what the Auditor General has reported in terms of conflict of interest, etc. But it was not conflict of interest by reporting public office holders, and that's all I can look at as a group. Conflict of interest by reporting public office holders. And in this case, I was asked specifically to look at 2 reporting public office holders, and I looked at them, at their activities.
Can you tell me how many current investigations your office has underway where they did meet the threshold of conflict of interest?
Right now?
Yes.
I have none. The last 2 were Mr. Vachon and Mr. Vermette. At the present time, I'm not investigating anybody. There are no facts that have been pointed out to me or requests received from Minister at amount. Give me sufficient facts so that I have reasonable grounds to believe that the act has been contravened, so that I can start an investigation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
That is the time.